Welcome to the Bloom Show. I am Saeed Naheem, your host. The Bloom Show, is brought to you by Above All Flowers and New Bloom Solutions. Today, what you're going to get out of the show is some great insight from two leading experts within the flower industry. Today we're going to cover economics, how economics is affecting consumer behavior. We're also going to cover consumer trends and consumer behaviors and many other topics that will affect and help you make decisions for 2024. The purpose of the Bloom Show is to help the floral industry innovate, connect, and bloom. Innovation is through the innovations and supporting innovation. Connecting is through all the media that we help connect all the flower industry together throughout all sectors through hearing from experts like this, and also bloom through all the services and solutions we offer. But truly, this is a community where we try to build here. And one thing we always ask is be selfish. And what does that mean? Is be selfish with your questions. Ask as many questions as you like. I don't want to say free information, but it kind of is. So any of those questions that you have about trends or about economics or where you should invest or where you shouldn't invest, ask away today for sure. At the end of the show, we will be announcing some special announcements, and this is the final show of 2023. So our season finale, and we're going out with a bang, and we might do it again next year if they say yes. So I'd like to introduce you to Melinda Knuth, PhD, North Carolina assistant professor in marketing and economics within the horticulture industry, and Mr. Charlie Hall, professor of Texas A&M. He doesn't need a big introduction, but we AKA'd him the money man, the floral money man. So we do ask you to please subscribe, like, and share. And again, feel free to ask all the questions or just to give Melinda a shout out or Charlie a shout out. It inspires us, and it's a great environment to be a part of. So without further ado, allow me to bring onto our show our two guests. Thank you.
Hi, y'all.
Y'all.
That was pretty good.
Yeah, I've been doing this for a little bit. Thank you. But I'm super excited. I'm actually a little nervous to have you guys on. It took me almost a year to get Melinda on. And then Charlie, I really appreciate your time. So first and foremost, thank you so much for your time. And as I said, I love to make this a tradition. So I'm putting some pressure on you guys, but I love to make it a tradition of having you on. So really, let's start to the gist of it. I'd love to know a little bit about Melinda. What's your background? How did you get in the industry? And what's your specialty so people could understand that?
Yeah, so my name is Dr. Melinda Knuth. I'm an assistant professor at North Carolina State University, and my research area focuses on the marketing and economics of horticulture products. So that ranges from looking at consumer preferences to willingness to pay to even some budget analyses, looking at different products. So my interest specifically in horticulture, it actually started in cut flowers. I began getting involved in cut flowers in high school in FFA. I worked for a couple wholesalers through my early career, and that was originally my intent with my degree, was to be a floral wholesaler. Unfortunately, though, the bank was not willing to give a 20-year-old a bunch of money to start a wholesaling business. And so my career kind of changed a little bit, but my love for flowers continued through my entire education to working with Charlie at getting my PhD at Texas A&M to now doing research on my own as a professor here at North Carolina State.
And how about yourself, Charlie? Thank you, Melinda.
Well, I grew up in the nursery business. So that was the side of the industry that I, for a long time, was exposed to. In fact, most of my research going through grad school and everything was regarding nursery crops, not necessarily floriculture crops. And it's only when I started at A&M in 1988 that I was basically in charge of every horticultural crop known to man, including fruits and veggies and nut crops and, of course, greenhouse and nursery. And that's where, my learning curve really started. And then there's been just several defining moments over a 35-year career in which, having a chance to, create a new Charlie, reinvent myself in several different points throughout my career. And the last one was, basically coming back to Texas. I was full professor, tenured here at Texas A&M, and I left and went to the University of Tennessee. And then I came back 17 years ago in this role, the Ellison Endowed Chair in International Floriculture. So that's where I did the deep dive. And of course, that coincided, that timing was 2007. And it was right before the Great Recession. So there's nothing like an economic downturn to increase the demand for an economist has to say. So I really, the whole circle of influence just exploded in terms of the outreach to the industry, because all of a sudden everybody wanted to hear what was going on with the economy and what was the state of the industry, and we weren't making money in spite of ourselves anymore. So that really promulgated a boost in my career. And then I've had the fortune of having some excellent grad students like Melinda, who I've referred to as one of the best. I hesitate to say the best, because there's grad students listening,
people watching.
So, but they've all been spectacular. But obviously, with Melinda being at NC State, she's obviously willing to go beyond the call of duty, because she can even dye her hair the color of NC State colors. So
yes.
she does what it takes to go beyond the call of duty.
You're in marketing, see? She majors in marketing too.
That's
exactly.
That's great. So you did mention something in about making more use, and I think that's always the real goal of a true leader, right? Of developing more use. So I didn't know that you guys were connected. I think you alluded to it a couple of times already, but Melinda, can you tell me how you connected and how you work together?
Absolutely. So in the short, Charlie was my PhD advisor, but it all started when I originally wanted to get an MBA, and I couldn't. Well, a series of events happened where that wasn't going to work out. And so then I reached out to a past advisor of mine, Dr. Ellen Paparosi, and asked, are there people in horticulture or areas of research related to business in horticulture? And she said, you have to talk to Dr. Charlie Hall. And so I wrote him an email. I just cold emailed him, and he said, hey, you got to come talk to me and work with me here at Texas A&M. And so I ended up moving to Texas, and then it's all history from there.
Wow.
Yeah,
so you moved to Texas.
It was a real cool, Saheed, coup on my part, Saheed, and getting her here, because the other place that she was interested in was going to Michigan State to work under Bridget Behe. And so I just laid all the chips on the table and said, you need to come down here. And unfortunately, she did.
Did Bridget ever find out?
Oh, yeah. We collaborated with Bridget on a ton of projects. And of course, I never failed to just, dig the knife in a little bit.
Bridget was on my PhD committee. So even though she wasn't my advisor, she was deeply involved in my PhD work, and she and I still collaborate extensively as well.
And so we haven't got into the questions, but we're backstage, or the bloom room, as I call it, chatting. And something that's cool is there's not too many of you, right? There's only a handful. So I want to, can you explain that just so they understand how rare you guys are?
Yeah. Well, if you can find one of us, if you can find one of us, we're like the wild pandas out in the in the wild. There's not very many.
Or that sun bear that's standing in China.
Yes. Right? Yes. And so I'm currently the lead of what we call a multi-state group. Okay. And these are groups of researchers who have similar topics in common. And so we have a small group here in the United States. I believe that there's about 10 of us that are active, that work on various parts of different things related to more of the social side of horticulture. So it can be things like production inputs and to labor, to marketing. Is there a category I'm missing, Charlie?
Well, did you say consumer behavior?
Oh, and of course, consumer behavior in my area.
Yeah. You
Yeah,
forgot about
consumer
yourself.
behavior. And so there's all of these different topics, but instead of competing with each other, since there's so few of us, instead we collaborate and go for grant
Wow.
monies and do projects together. Instead of, like I said, instead of all of us competing with each other, the tide rises all the boats and we work together.
That's great. And that's something we love to share is collaboration. And that is awesome because you're very important to our industry as a source of information. So thank you again for being here. That's awesome. So let's get into the questions.
Yes.
Trends in economics effect. So over the past few years, what significant trends have you observed in the floral industry, particularly in the terms of consumer preferences? And we can maybe focus to like 2002, 2003, and then what might be happening next year. And whoever wants to take it, feel free to jump in. If you want to start, Melinda, that'd be great.
Sure. Yeah. So actually, a lot of the significant things that we've seen happen have continued on regardless of what we've seen with COVID. So back in 2019, Charlie and I actually made a document, and it was the driving forces of change in the floriculture industry.
Mhm.
And
Which is funded by the entire industry. Is
Wow.
all the associations, every single one of the floral associations contributed to funding that particular project.
Yes.
One of a kind.
Is that done every so often, every few years? How is that done?
It's the first time ever.
Yeah, that was the first
Wow.
time, and they and I'm not sure if it well, I hope it happens again, but there's not been talks of, it continuing. But yeah, it's been something of interest that all of the associations had to know, well,
Wow.
what's affecting our industry and what's it like going forward.
Mhm.
And when Charlie and I made that document, we were using historical information to influence the different driving forces that we were talking about. And it's almost like we read a crystal ball, because I periodically go back to that document because the same driving forces are still the ones that we're seeing today on like driving where the industry is going.
Mhm.
And a lot of what we're seeing is that, specifically in consumer preferencing, is that we're going away from just event-based. That's been primarily what our industry has been focused on, is event-based purchasing. And it's going into about half of it now, and maybe more depending on what business you are, supermarkets versus retail. It's going into self-purchasing. So not just event-based, not just based on a holiday, an everyday purchase as well. Also with weddings, which is our primary area of purchasing for events, that's a big
Mhm.
category for our industry, as well as Valentine's Day. Weddings are changing, and the way that the average American consumer is having their wedding, it's going away from churches, going more outdoors, more event location based. That's changing how people are buying and thinking about floral as well.
Can you give us a little insight into that? So what has changed? Is it smaller bouquets? Is it the smaller floral tablescapes? How does that work?
So it's no longer about decorating the church. It's about decorating the space. There we go. And it's actually, people are spending more on their flowers now. And even though they're having smaller weddings, it's about creating this environment, creating this memory through this wedding. And so that has been really interesting, and that's continued to increase over time. What's really interesting, and this is where, again, looking at historical information, we're going to exclude COVID for a minute, but if you look at the trends of weddings over time, the number of weddings is decreasing and people are getting married later in life. So this is not to say that all of a sudden no one's going to get married. It's just to say that this is going to continue where people are getting married later in life. That's not a bad thing because most millennials aren't even able, well, a lot of the younger millennials aren't able to even purchase their home right now. They're living in rentals. And so waiting till later in life to get married actually increases the amount of disposable income that they have access to because they're later on in their career, which
Wow.
is a good thing for our industry. It's just a shift in the ages in which they're getting married. And then secondly, the number of weddings is decreasing, but that's also a product of the less religion and other social pressures as well. But in I think that that's still okay. And I'm going to say this in the context of if you look at the overall industry,
Yeah.
we have more of these self purchasing, not events based purchasing. And so it's not, even though for that segment of the industry, okay, well, weddings are decreasing, that's over time, we're talking from the 1940s until now, they've decreased.
Mhm.
And, but they're still going to happen, just at a lesser extent.
Well, I have so many more questions, and I'll ask in a second. But Charlie, you want to add to any of that?
Well, in that particular study, we were really curious to see the changes in the structure of the floral industry over time. And was there any indication of how that structure was going to continue to change over time? Because certainly this is not our grandfathers or grandmothers industry that we're talking about. There's been monumental shifts over the last 50 years. The advent of supermarket floral was one of the first revolutionary structural changes in the industry. And much has been written about that. And back in the day when SAF collected the Ipsos data, Marvin Miller and others would analyze that data infinitum and talking about some of those structural changes. But really, if recent times, even supermarket floral has changed pretty. What's my adjective there? I don't want to say dramatically, but it's almost like they've tried to emulate the independent florist in the supermarket setting and have more of a mass prestige type of atmosphere. And HEB here in Texas, for example, they do a ton of weddings, and they've rebranded their floral shop in the supermarket, and that rebranding has really given them a chance to compete for business that the traditional florist has typically fulfilled. Now, that's had implications for traditional florists. And we have, roughly 45% of the florists that we used to have. In 2001, I think there were 21,000 florists, and today we have, roughly 12,000. That number shifts because of the quarterly census of employment and wages and so forth. All that data and the number of establishments gets tweaked every few years and corrected. So, but we're roughly half the number of florists over the last 20 years. So that's a major structural change, and some of that was promulgated by supermarkets, some of it by e-commerce. And so the floral, online floral, has also captured some of that market share. But then even from the e-commerce side, you've got this direct to consumer trend, a movement, shift, whatever you want to call it, where we no longer even have to go through the traditional supply chain. And you've got product coming direct from the farms to the consumer. You've got entities like 50flowers.com that in the height of wedding season are doing 3,000 weddings a week. Are you kidding me? Of flowers being shipped from the farm directly to the bridezilla, or wait a minute, I wasn't supposed to say that. Or
did
to
not say that.
the bride's.
I'll blip that out. I'll bleep that out.
So there's some major structural shifts that were occurring prior to the pandemic And then the real question is, post-pandemically, are those same structural shifts going to still occur? It took a while when the fear of COVID dissipated for events to really kick into high gear. And in some cases, there was a delayed demand. It's for events. Weddings were put off. Even funeral services or memorial services were put off until we could come face to face again. And that along with people using flowers to express emotions because they couldn't meet face to face, that promulgated just a demand, a flurry of demand for our industry. And no fresh product industry can respond instantaneously to those spikes in demand. So that caused a lot of supply chain issues. And we saw a just-in-time supply chain that we had spent 4 decades in developing completely unravel. And of course, the flights and the number of flights was reduced dramatically. Our trucking industry was just pummeled during that time period with the lack of demand. And then we started buying everything we could, all the unnecessary plastic objects that we bought from Amazon. We started buying like crazy. And of course, that created a lot of demand for trucking. And so we went from this dearth of demand from the pandemic to this hyper demand. And so we needed more flowers. We needed more allied trade inputs, and we couldn't get them because they were delayed or the supply chain was so disruptive. Fortunately, we've turned the corner in that, but I could keep going, but I don't want this to turn into a lecture. Let's keep it a conversation.
No, this is like, I'm just taking notes. If it is a lecture, I'm just taking notes and learning so much. So question for you, and I have a couple of questions for you as well, Melinda, when it just comes to this one question is, and I could be here all day. How does that look for next year and the next years? Because is there going to be too much supply? What is that going to do for our demand? What is that going to do for pricing?
Let me jump in real quick.
You were on a roll, so go.
There's an effect that we call in economics called the bullwhip effect. Anytime you have those either spikes or reductions in demand, the supply chain is going to react accordingly. And so we reacted to that dearth of product by building up inventory.
Yep.
All right. And then we saw that inventory hit the marketplace, and we've seen the downward pressure on price that causes. But then there's always a right sizing. There's a reconciling of that. Okay. And I think that's where at least many of the growers are right sizing the inventory still as we speak. And plus retailers are, both the supermarket retailers and florists are figuring out, all right, what are the right sizing that we've got to do in terms of the flower purchasing, but also the right sizing that we need to do in terms of input purchases. Because during the pandemic, when the lead times were so long, florists, supermarket florists, everybody started hoarding allied trade inputs. And so now you're seeing the allied trade go through a little bit of a lull because I'm a florist. I've got my back room is full. I'm a wholesale florist. I got a warehouse here that's full of input because I bought everything thinking I was not going to be able to get it. And now I've got to right size my inventory. So I think that's the transition that the industry is still going through in terms of right sizing. But I think the demand is normalizing. But is it normalizing back to what it was pre-2019, or is it normalizing to a level above where we were 2019? And to date, we're still above where we were in 2019, but we're starting to see some slowing, right? Okay. The sales are going up, but that's because of the price effect. We raised prices during this time period because we had to, because the input cost increased. So now sales are increasing, but units sold are not necessarily increasing. So what we're gaining, but are we gaining? So you got to look at units sold. And unfortunately, there's not a lot of good data on units that are sold. We can look at the number of flowers that we import by unit, but that's only part of the picture. We got domestic production as well. And domestic production thrived during the pandemic because proximity to markets. And they were the ones that could fill orders quickly. And so they had a great time during that pandemic when they were close to market and were able to get the price that they needed to make a profit.
And so, Melinda, going back to the question I asked you and your answers is, you said something that self-buying, right? Self-care is increasing. There's a big movement, one with that flower feeling, as well as the Floral Marketing Board. And there's great shows like Jay Schwanke's Life in Bloom, things like that, that is encouraging that. Has there been a study or some sort of understanding of, are these things helping? Which I believe that they are, but have you?
So there's not. And so what you're talking about is an economic, or not an economic, an impact state or assessment on how are, how are these things impacting and improving, negative or neutral in the overall effect on demand. And as there's not been anyone done in this industry recently. Charlie and another researcher at Texas A&M did one in 2008, or was it 9?
You're talking to an old man. I can't remember that far back.
So it was done a while ago, looking at, okay, well, what have, like the Got Milk or the other similar programs, but in different industries, how successful were they? And there's kind of a mixed bag on if they're successful or not. So we don't know specifically for our industry. I think that the increase in demand that we have seen is due to the fact that people were beautifying their homes during COVID. Because actually in 2019, we were plateauing, like we were not grossing very much. And then all of a sudden in COVID, as Charlie was saying, all of a sudden there's an explosion. And that's because instead of people spending much of their disposable income on eating out, which was a huge expenditure from 2015 to 2019, all the restaurants were closed. So they have this disposable income and they're at their home. Well, what are they going to do? They're going to invest in hobbies. They're going to invest into their space. They're going to invest into beautifying around them because that's where they're occupying primarily. That's why we saw home improvement and the price of wood go off the charts, as well as gardening. The number of gardeners, new gardeners in 2020 to 2021 was astronomical. We could barely keep things on the shelf. And this was a similar thing for hobby style industries and for pets. People they're home, they're spending time.
Spoiling their pets,
Adoption of pets and the pet industry also exploded. And so what is interesting to see is now, as we're exiting the pandemic area of, time, is will this continue? And as Charlie said, I think it's going to normalize more towards the 2019 numbers, simply because if you look at the way that it's going and the trend, I think that it's going to end up sitting similar to that. But we don't know for certain. But as far as your initial question on how successful are different programs to promote flowers, we don't know that question either. That one is uncertain.
Go ahead, Charlie.
What we do know is that we don't need to waste a good crisis.
Yes.
And if you always do what you always done, you always get what you've always gotten.
Yeah.
So
there
we
you
continue
go. Exactly.
Going
continue
back
pushing
to the same order of business that we did pre-pandemic, shame on us.
Yes.
Right.
I
Shame
agree.
on
100%.
us. Because now it's and Melinda mentioned the marketing orders that have been put into place for other commodities like milk, like beef, like pork. And, after got milk, milk consumption increased during got milk. There's no doubt about it. But now today, milk consumption is less than it was prior to got milk. So when you go down that path, you have to keep going down that path. And our industry has historically not done as much advertising promotion as what we've needed. We used to do a lot more than what we do now, but there's still, which is the most effective tool. Yeah, and right now, Christine Bolt is leading a program that is rolling out in different cities. And the early indications are that, yes, it's having a spike in demand. But how do you separate how much of that spike was from the pandemic and how much was from the promotion? It depends on who's doing the analysis and what. But it has some promising. But once you go down that path, you got to keep going down that path. And so one of the things that I always like to ask myself is what is it that I can do differently in order to change the paradigm so that people don't view flowers as as a luxury that they can cast aside when there's an economic downturn, but they start viewing flowers as a necessity in their lives.
And that's a question that I had. Go ahead, Charlie. Sorry, Eric. Go ahead.
I'm anticipating your question.
Yeah. Go for it.
So obviously this was a health related pandemic.
Yes, sir.
We'd never seen a global health pandemic like this. And so not only did it cause a lot of physiological damage among the human race and a lot of deaths and so forth, but it creates a lot of mental anguish and stress as well. So during this time period, SAF and other associations in the industry did a marvelous job of making sure that we put into the forefront the idea that flowers are part of the answer. And research has shown that. We can thank right now the medical community and the psychological community. We will never be able to thank them enough for the millions of dollars of research where they have shown that our industry does affect physiological health. It does affect mental health and acuity and cognitive health. And for dementia, Alzheimer's patients, for kids with ADHD. I mean, the benefits go on and on and on. And I only have a stump soapbox to stand on for a few more years. And for the remaining years that I'm able to stand on that soapbox, I will continually come back to these mental and physiological benefits of flower, shrubs, and trees, and particularly flowers, because all-cause mortality, for example, for women goes down by 12% when they're surrounded by flowers and green spaces. Wow. Now, we don't know what it is for men. Who cares? They didn't do the study on men. But 12% less fewer all-cause mortality. I mean, it's a matter of life and death. It truly is. Wow. And so when you start talking about that kind of value proposition for our industry, then you can start moving the needle in terms of inelasticity of demand. And any promotional efforts you take on need to be, they need to have these messages also couched in that promotion and making sure that we're telling folks the right thing. It's where we're expressing love, we're expressing feelings, yes, but we're also enhancing health, self-care, wellness for everybody that consumes flowers.
Charlie, you forgot to say thank you to one person, Miley Cyrus.
Oh yeah. Her song. Yeah.
Just kidding. No, thank you to associations. But you saw what that Flower Feeling did. They did a billboard saying thank you to Miley Cyrus.
I know. It was
super creative.
That's doing something outside the box, not doing the same old thing that we always did, but the same old ads that we always used to create.
And I think what everybody, like even Jay, educating, and that's just another level now, like the Bob Ross, but now flowers. That just continues. And the question I had, and again, we just asked one question on my list, is culture. How long does it take for a culture to become, right? Because I believe there's a flower culture in New York. I believe that there's a little bit of a flower culture in Seattle where you see the flower markets and you see people walking around with their bunches because it's more of a dreary, rainy environment, cold. How long does it take to build flower culture? Is there an answer to that?
I
Yeah.
don't know if they're, did you say yeah?
Maybe
No,
Charlie has it.
well, I might have, but it just
Okay.
it's one of those.
Because in reality,
If I did, it was an
habit
N word that
started.
came out. It wasn't. It
The
wasn't
habit
supposed to.
started during
Mhm.
COVID. So I'm wondering how long does it take to become a habit or culture? Like in Europe, there's a
Yes.
culture. Holland, there's a culture. You're buying flowers everywhere every
Yeah,
day. So
yeah.
I
Yeah.
was curious. Maybe there's not an answer to that, but
But
So,
those cultures are very different from
yes, they are.
ours. First of all, the
course.
geographic space and how
yeah,
spread out
the
we
length of
are,
the
and
supply
so
chain
forth.
makes a big difference there. But if
Yeah.
when you are talking about what you're saying with a culture is you're saying a behavioral shift.
There you go.
And
Yeah.
so we're gonna get into a little psychology for a minute.
All right, there we go.
So our thoughts uh, are based on our perceptions. Our perceptions are based on our attitudes. Our attitudes influence our behavior. So it begins with perceptions. And this is something that we talk about in research is, we're getting down to the impact. So what is the impact of it? And so we go from, okay, how do people think, or, what are they thinking about, to attitude changes. So what Charlie's saying, where, oh, these flowers are needed. They're not just wanted, they are needed. To then a behavioral shift of then, okay, well, then I'm going to start continually buying them for self rather than just for event as wanted. I need this consistently. And so when we're talking about shifts in behavior, we're talking 5, 10, 15-year timelines, because the realistically, people do not change quickly. I mean, look at our culture. Our culture doesn't change very
Yeah.
quickly. It's a very
Yeah.
slow shift. And so and those are changes in behaviors, is when we have changes in the way that we behave as societies. And so realistically, this is a long-term event that's occurring slowly, but what it's influenced by is attitudes. So, what people are thinking and how do they think about it? I know that's kind of weird to say it that way,
Mhm,
but
mhm.
their perceptions and their attitudes.
Wow, super cool. Thank you for answering that question. That's awesome. So let's get to a question here, right? So could you
It also takes a
Good.
long time
Long
Yeah,
time.
of
I
repeated
can
messaging
yeah,
and reinforcing.
consistency.
Yes,
Exactly.
consistency. Yeah,
Yeah, that's key.
consistent perceptions. Yes.
Exactly. So, could you share some insight into how different age groups or segments have adjusted their flower consumption patterns due to economic changes? So, what are the different gens doing at the moment when it comes to purchasing flowers due to the cash flows?
So, what's really cool is that I just looked at a report on different generational purchasing from Ibis World. It was
Okay.
released this year. We are now to about 25% of each of the 4 generations that are in the job market. So that would be baby boomers, Gen X, Gen Y, which is millennials, and then
Mhm.
Gen Z, the Zoomers. About 25% of shoppers um, at retail florists are each of these 4 categories. So we're moving out of
Wow.
we're moving out of the era of baby boomers being our primary purchaser. And so focusing only on them in our messaging and in the types of types of designs that we create, and the way that they purchase is, you look like you're like chomping at the bit there, Charlie.
Well,
He's about to go.
you
We're
know, which
rounding him
buttons
up.
to push.
Focusing only on them, which we've primarily done in the industry, is no longer going to cut it. We have, 75% of the buyers in the market are the other generations, Gen X, Gen Y, and Gen Z. And so one of the key things, and this is not new for our industry, but one of the things that I would really like to say about that is make sure that you have an excellent website as well as an excellent in-person location,
Oh,
because you can think of your website as like an online retail location. It has to look good, it has to function well, because that's where, the Gen Ys and the Gen Zs, that's where they're going to look first. They're going to, 75% of people who purchase flowers, plants, and seeds research where they're going to buy it and what they're going to buy before they even come in store. So even the people who are coming in store have already looked at your online presence before they come to even buy from you in person. So it's very important to have that dual presence. All right,
Wow.
Charlie, now you can chomp at the bit there.
Well, I was just thinking that, boomers are still going to be have an inordinate amount of influence on the floral market. And not necessarily because of our consumption power, because at the rate at which we'll be exiting planet Earth.
For sure.
And
Funerals.
there'll be, for funeral flowers. And
Wow.
so, I mean, you look at weddings, as Melinda mentioned earlier, the millennials and Gen Zers, the Zoomers, are getting married later, but they are spending flowers. They're buying them differently, as we talked about earlier, but they are spending on the flowers. And millennials represent 38% of home buying. So they are just now, the oldest millennial is 43 years of age. So they're coming into their income levels, which they'll be able to afford more expensive SKUs in the floral market. So I'm still proactive in terms of encouraging everyone in the floral industry, hold the line on pricing. Hold
Agreed.
the line. Do not falter and start lowering price because of pressure. Okay, so you're getting a little pushback right now. You should always be getting pushback. If you're not getting pushback, you're not raising your prices often enough and high enough. So there's a lot of people that leave money on the table because they cave when two people start pushing back in terms of pricing. So, that's, if there's one message I think that I wish everybody could hear, is hold the line on pricing. We work too hard to get there. So if you look at inelasticity of demand, when demand is inelastic, if we've been successful with the messaging, you can raise your price. And even if you sell fewer units, total revenue for the firm still goes up. That's the whole premise of inelasticity of demand. Now, if you do a poor job of messaging, and you don't create that elasticity of demand, and it's elastic, then you'll lose money faster than what you did before. So this is where we got to be good marketers, and we got to make sure that we're omni-channel in our approach. As Melinda said, the online website is our silent salesperson. Well, on the allied trade side, we've got to have web shops, right? We got to make it easy for people to do business with us. And that may not be through the traditional models. It may be kiosks that we have spread over every airport worldwide, and making sure that people take flowers with them on the way home.
Or vending machines.
As well.
Well,
that's what I was thinking. I said kiosk, but you read my mind there. So thank you.
We've been doing that all the show. So
So and some of the differences between generations, I get it. Well, we got to be able to make presentations about something at all of our floral conventions and so forth. But I mean, when somebody walks in my florist shop, am I going to know whether that lady is 45 years old? Is she 55 years old? Or is she 35 years old and just doesn't age well? I'm not making that call. So what if there's demographic differences? How am I going to use that in terms of my merchandising at the store level, right? So some of this information, but the differences between the demographics, okay, it's good to know, particularly in terms of our advertising and promotion, and what do millennials read and what do they watch versus other. Okay, I get it, but some of it's stage of life as well. And some of the Gen Z is not the stage of life where they can afford to buy a lot of flowers. They can still buy, succulents. They can still buy foliage plants or what have you.
Oh,
If we have a broad-based portfolio, we can take advantage of entry-level price points and different entry-level SKUs, and we can cultivate, hey, pun intended, we can cultivate these consumers as they go through stage of life. And so when they get to their
yeah.
main income earning years, then their attitudes have shifted and their behaviors then shift. Then they think that they need flowers and not necessarily it's a luxury.
Mm-hmm.
Not a question, but kind of a thing that I have and trying to educate as well the wholesalers, because our audience consists of wholesalers, distributors, growers, logistics. Is wholesalers should also focus on e-commerce, because what I always get is, oh, my florist, they don't, we're B2B, but that florist is also a consumer, correct? So that behavior is the same expectations they would have when shopping at a Target. Could you speak a little bit to that as well? Like, am I thinking bonkers, or is that true that you should, even if you're B2B, focus on the trends of how to connect with customers as well?
Are
Yeah.
you talking about the end consumer? So
No, I'm talking
wholesalers
about
should market to the end consumer?
the florist, right?
Okay.
Because wholesalers think we don't need a website, we don't need e-commerce or some, right? For our
Oh,
florists, they don't need it. They're B2B. I believe that you still need to cater to them as they would expect service at an Amazon, or service of buying, whatever they buy. Can you allude to that a little bit? I just think, it's important to also say wholesalers cater to your florists as if they would expect to be catered to when they're a consumer themselves. Does that make any sense?
Yeah.
yes.
Yeah. And I go back to this previous phrase. If you always do what you always done, if you always get what you always got.
Yeah.
Those wholesale florists that are
Word.
most
Yeah.
successful in today's market are not conducting business the same way they did 10 years ago.
Yep.
They're nimble, they're more flexible, because at one point, I didn't say it out loud, but I thought it, that wholesale florists are antiquated. They're no longer needed.
Not all of them, but I don't think they're not all
Oh, wait, hold
needed.
on.
No, I
Yeah.
said,
They'll
I
always
said
be
that's what
needed,
I used to think. I never
Okay,
said it out
okay.
loud. This
Got
is
it.
the first time I've even said it out loud. So I need to
Gotcha.
continue for my sentence before I get pounded.
Yeah. I
So-
was about to.
Yeah. So he was going to
Melinda's
come at
wait.
you. Yeah.
But again, those that have been nimble and flexible and created new services, provided new solutions for their florist customers, those are the ones doing better now. And
Adding
that's not,
value up front,
you look at
connecting.
the 500 or so in the US or what have you, it's an 80-20 rule.
Yeah.
There's the 20% that are doing exactly what I'm talking about, that are the most successful and doing well and growing their business. But it's hard, because you've got to manage the supply chain and the disruptions that occur in supply chains, but you also have to manage what the florist is seeing, and what are the solutions that they need. And not all florists are created equal as well, right?
Yeah,
That's why we have
100%.
half the florists that what we had in 2021. So let's dance with who brung us to the dance, and let's segment our customer base, and let's work with the florists that
Segment our
are
customer
willing
base,
to
very
make
important.
the changes, and to and have the messaging in their marketing, et cetera, to satisfy the end consumer, so that they create this attitude shift that Melinda's talking about. And if I'm a wholesale florist, then how do I approach that florist differently? How do I provide the professionalism that the florist doesn't have? Not that I'm not saying all florists. I'm saying that some florists are very good designers. They produce great arrangements and so forth, but they're not the best business people. All
Mhm.
right. So if I'm a wholesale florist, I'm going to provide programs to make sure that my customers are successful, whether they be brick and mortar, whether it be online, or what have you.
Yeah, and that's what's very important about value, education, collaborations.
Yeah,
There's a lot of wholesalers that do a great job of that as well. It's thinking of it as a
absolutely.
partnership, not
Mhm.
just here, buy my box of flowers and good luck. So
Yeah, that's another
adding
thing I wanted
value and investing in your customer, and we create a lot of content because we believe that it's asking for value. So it's what the other day I heard: jab, 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 hook. Value, 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 ask,
Yeah,
which is very important.
yeah.
My partner here, David Kaplan, has a quick question. I think we kind of went over it, but what happens to overproduction as we generate more revenue and less volume of actual flowers sold? Does that?
Well, as we've seen in any industry, when that happens, there's
Let me
there's
follow up.
shakeout.
Mhm.
Okay.
There's only so many that can survive in that type of atmosphere. So we'll continue seeing consolidation. We'll see um, more. There'll be more growers that are tied to certain channels. We've already seen that, but we'll see even more of that. So I think the structural changes are not over with. That's and uh, if folks don't right size their inventory, if they continue producing as though it's 2021, not partying like it's 1991, but they still continue producing like it's 2021, then shame on them, right? You got to react to the market. Now, if I show you a chart of flower seeds and potted plants right now, so it had glacial growth, and then the pandemic hits, and we're taking off at a 45-degree angle, and we're just this year has the sales of flower seeds and potted plants started leveling off, right, and
Mhm.
flattening. So does that mean we're getting ready to head downward towards 2019, or are we on a new plateau that may be growing glacially, very slowly, but at least we're higher than what we were.
Yeah.
We can build off of that.
Mhm.
Well, that's where I hope that we are, and it may take some right sizing in terms of the number of growers or the amount of volume. Um, Again, those are some of the things that we think are happening because the units sold are going down, but again, the overall sales. But is that a bad thing?
Hmm.
Well, if we convince more people, and one other demographic factor that's if you look at the capacity to spend, we have it right now. That's going to last for another 2 or 3 years. The capacity to spend based off of the COVID relief dollars, but we also have 84 million millennials that think the same way as their boomer parents or grandparents.
Mhm.
So if that gives me great optimism that at least for the next decade, we've got a demographic segment that's 84 million strong that is emulating boomers, which bring us to the table to begin with. So this is good news. There's some good demographic
Wow.
underlying demand there that's going to be coming down the pipeline. They may be able to absorb as they come into their main income earning years. Like I said, they may be able to absorb some of that added volume. But again, we got the proof's in the pudding. Are we doing enough to convince them to continue buying? Are we relevant to them? So far, the answer is yes. But are we going to continue to be relevant when they are up with their income earning years and are deciding whether to buy a BMW or other furniture or what have you, some big durable goods items versus flowers?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it's cool what you said is we keep on the same thing, we get the same results. So
Yeah.
it's
Mhm.
continue doing what we're doing now and the marketing boards and all that, and hopefully
Yeah.
that'll help. So
Oh,
before,
oh,
I
oh,
know,
and
go ahead,
and
go ahead.
sustainability is a part of that.
Say again?
Yes, it is.
Sustainability
Sustainability.
is a part of
Yes.
that. And that's
Perfectly.
where, Melinda has been doing a lot of work in
Yes.
sustainability. And this is where the millennial and Gen Z generation is going to make a big difference. And those
Mhm.
companies
Huge
that are able to articulate how sustainable they are, then they're going to have the advantage in the marketplace. And there's a paper that Cole Etheridge at Mississippi State just finished looking at the willingness to pay of sustainability. And the vast majority, 2/3 or 3/4 or 80%. It was on up there. I don't remember the exact percentage. Say that they're willing to buy from florists that are quote unquote sustainable.
Mhm.
They're willing to pay more, and if they reuse some of their floral waste, they're more likely to
Wow.
frequent those shops. So those are stated preferences.
Mhm.
And sometimes we say things that we don't necessarily end up doing, but still, I mean, it's better than saying, I don't give a flip.
The
So,
perception is there.
yeah.
As
Now,
you
does
said
the
in the
attitude
beginning. Yeah.
follow?
Yeah.
And the behavior follow, but the perception is there. But yeah, as Charlie was saying, I'm leading a project with the American Floral Endowment on sustainability, specifically in floriculture, and to assist businesses with implementing different sustainability measures from environmental to social to economic. We're creating short guides on the up-to-date information on sustainability.
Awesome. Great.
And so that's going to be rolling out here pretty soon. I can't give you an exact date, but we're currently working on that because that's one of our roles as as researchers, is to take the information, distill it down, and then help the industry. So that's what we're doing.
So we have a couple minutes, but you said you guys could go all day. So
Oh yeah,
I
we
think
can
we're
go
going
all
day.
day.
So everybody grab a bite because I still have like 20 questions.
Yes.
Go ahead, Charlie. What were we gonna?
Well, I was just going to say there are some firms that are doing it right.
Oh yeah.
Right.
Okay.
We've got a compostable floral foam now. We've got the Terra Brick. We've got Express. We have products that are really showcasing sustainability through the supply chain. And for millennial and Gen Z consumers, it may make the difference
Mhm.
in terms of whether we make that sale or not. So we have to continue down this line, and there's some exciting technologies that are coming out right now
Yeah.
that we can hang a hat on.
Like you said earlier, hold the line, right?
Yeah, that's right. That's right.
Hold the line. So, question for you, Melinda and Charlie yourselves. I saw that you were an article was written about the types of flower arrangements and kind of the setup of the visual of the flower arrangements. Can you talk a little bit about that article, and are those trends that we expect for next year, and how does that affect the florist? And so.
So this was a project that we did when I was still at Texas, and we wanted to know how people's perceptions about floral design, did that actually match up with the different floral design techniques that we do? And so we were looking at, we created 64 different floral designs and put them into groups and showed with eye tracking technology, showed them to consumers and asked, which one do you like? And using statistics, we were able to discern, okay, this is, this group of consumers like straight line versus this group likes oblique line, so non-straight, symmetry versus asymmetry. And this is kind of a cornerstone, like beginning paper, or I would like it to be, looking at the different visual aspects of floral design. So what people are looking at, does that actually match up with what we design in the industry?
And we looked at species substitution in that study as well.
We did. Yes.
Can we substitute less expensive flowers for some of the more expensive flowers? And is it really the shape of the flower head, or the color? Is it really the color that they're after? Or is it truly the species? Is it truly the rose? Or is it simply the rose is this size and this color? And it could be any species as long as it's that size and that color.
So what were the results?
Yes,
Can you give us an
absolutely.
Awesome.
So people liked the oblique line. People also liked a lot of symmetry, which is interesting. So they didn't like straight line, but they like symmetry. They also tend to like analogous and complementary designs better than monochromatic and polychromatic. So like, complementary is when they're opposites on the color wheel. So purple, yellow, or orange, what's on the opposite side? Blue. There we go. So like those opposites on the color wheel, or analogous is where they're right next to each other on the color wheel. So all that to say, they like some color, they didn't like one singular color or too many colors. Polychromatic is for more colors.
Okay.
So that was really interesting to see. We also saw, and this was not surprising, that Americans are predominantly orientated to roses. Not surprising. You know, this comes from our long heritage coming from the English tea gardens, where many Americans emigrated from in England and in upper Western Europe. And so we get a lot of influence from there. That's also why we have a lot of lawns, in case you are wondering. We get a lot of influence there. And so that was not surprising to see. And so this study is generalistically across consumers. So hopefully we can dig in and look at different preferences by groups, or by also age groups, or I know that we got lots of questions about Hispanic populations versus white populations, because there's perception, there's differences there. So that's something that I look forward to looking at more in the future. But the last thing that Charlie said when he was talking was that the difference between or when we are changing out flowers and we're having substitutions, the average consumer cannot tell. And so when we had a dahlia versus a spider mum, there's a big price difference between the two. They saw them as exactly the same because they had the same shape. And so there's an opportunity there in our industry, not for all consumers, especially those who are highly knowledgeable in floral design, but there's an opportunity there to, provide substitutions within some bouquets and within some arrangements, because consumers see them as the same.
And what percentage of consumers are highly knowledgeable?
Not a lot. Okay. And so, yeah, it's like very little. I can't give you an
You have to be in the flower industry, right?
Yeah, you have to be in the flower industry or purchase a lot. Like we're talking weekly buyers who can name flowers, and say, I want a pink, not a pink rose, like I want a pink lisianthus. Like if they know what a lisianthus is, they're a knowledgeable consumer. And so that's where, knowing who your audience is at your business is important. But if you know that you have just general consumers coming in, they don't necessarily have a lot of knowledge, you could do some substitutions there, because as long as it fits the shape and that's what they're seeking.
Shape. Okay.
It's going to fit what they're desiring when they're buying.
So we had a question here real quick, kind of a request/question, is Trisha Dugan said, can you share the write-up for this report, or where can this report be found?
Yes. The question is, which one? The one that we're currently talking about?
The shape, I guess. Yeah.
Okay. So that is
preference for arrangements.
Yeah. So I'm going to direct you to my website. Actually, Can I just put it in the chat?
Yeah, go for it.
Okay.
I think you could put it on the comments, or I could post a comment. Let me see.
Yeah, let me put it in the chat, because that is where both studies are published, and you can find them there on my website.
Can we share those things through our newsletters? And
Oh,
let's talk. No, let's talk. I would love to be more connected to those resources. We could share it through our newsletter. That's great. Awesome. Okay. So did it come out? Here, let me grab it. Awesome. And then boom. And here you go. You got what you asked for. See, that's why you should ask questions. I'm telling you, that is awesome. Now you'll know the shape. That is great. Does it show the shapes and things like that, or?
No, we were doing it based off of the basic shapes that we talk about in floral design. So we have
Okay.
line, mass, filler.
Cool.
So
Great.
that's what,
Good enough.
we're speaking the floral lingo there.
Awesome. Awesome. I look forward to seeing it myself. Charlie, any inputs, any additional inputs?
Hold the line.
Awesome. I love that. I love that, Charlie. I love that.
Because
Holding the line.
we still have some runway left in terms of
Mhm.
added input cost.
Okay.
You know, I calculate an index of prices paid for the industry. And from 2021 over 20, we had a 10.1% increase in our inputs. And then from 22 over 21, we had an 8.4%. This year, I'm forecasting a 1.9% increase in input costs. And then next year, 1.6%. So we can't be giving the product away or some of our margin away because we still got more added input cost, and it's mainly in the form of labor. I mean, there's some other inputs that obviously are more expensive because of the inputs for those input to make those inputs. But the other thing is that we don't know what's going to happen to fuel prices because we've got Ukraine and we've got Israel.
Yeah.
And for example, with Israel, if the conflict stays within Gaza, then we'll have maybe a $4 increase in the price of oil over the next year.
Mm-hmm.
But if with some of the Syrian and Lebanese terrorist groups come in that are funded by Iran, that could mean as much as a $16 a barrel increase in oil. And then if Iran jumps in itself, you're talking about a $64 barrel increase. So depending on how this shakes out, it could have major implications for commodity prices around the world, particularly tied to energy. So
Wow.
this is not a little thing. And it's not something that we say, oh, that's their problem. No, it could be everyone's problem.
Mm-hmm.
Wow, Charlie. I hate to end it at that note, but but it's what it is. It's facts. So I appreciate you saying hold the line, because that is one question everybody has now. You know,
Yeah.
where should we be pricing? What should we be pricing at? So I truly appreciate that, bringing that up today. So Charlie, I feel like I want to ask you so many more questions, but we're already up with an hour. Thank you to the audience for hanging tough for an hour and 7 minutes. Truly appreciate it. Melinda, any final words from you?
Yeah, just if you have any questions, please reach out to me on LinkedIn, on my email. Anyway, would be happy to answer more questions if there's any.
And how can people get more involved in helping your research? How do you find funds for your research, if I may?
They should contribute to AFE.
There you
Yes.
go. Awesome
Mhm.
question.
Yeah.
I'm going to have them on
Yeah.
next year for
And
sure.
join SAF and support
you
their
go.
trade associations. That's where the magic happens right there.
Yep.
You see that? That's great.
That's where all our floral research is funded, is through the associations and through the endowment.
Yeah.
Through the endowment.
Yes.
So that endowment is more important than we all, it's as important as it seems,
It
because
is. Yeah.
we're actually supporting them for the Bloom Together initiative that we're doing. We'll be donating to them this year and to Seed Your Future.
Oh, that's great. Yeah.
So we're super excited about doing that. And I'm starting to learn more and more about the Floral Endowment. So we have a Carly Nelson is saying, very insightful. Thank you, everyone, for your time and insights.
Of course.
And then it says, someone said, Grace, it says page not found. Did I put that the right way? Here, let me do it again. Here, I'm going to do it on the banner so you could see it. Is this correct? Wait. Maybe
Well,
not.
I clicked the link that Melinda sent to you and it worked great. So
Mhm.
Is that it? Let me see. Maybe it. No, wait. Give me a second. But why is it saying new opens new tab? I hope that's correct. It comes out differently. Is that it?
Oh, let's see. Yes.
Okay.
Yep, that's correct.
That's it. That's the one that's here, guys. So I / right, edu.edu. Yeah, that's the one that's on the. Let me make sure to put it on the comments again, just in case. For some reason when I copy it, it says something like opens or something, so I'm not sure.
Okay.
And was there a backslash on behind edu?
Yep.
Okay. So I'm posting it again. There you go. As I hope you could find it. If not, we'll send it out on our email newsletter that many of you connected to. And if not, go to our website. You can connect to our newsletter. So thank you again, everybody. Truly appreciate you. And again, see you. I'm going to try this. See you again next year.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Awesome.
Absolutely.
That'll be great. So I really appreciate that. And I'll reach out to you and hope that we get you on here again next year. And maybe we do an hour and a half, or
Yeah,
2
there we
hours,
go.
because you guys should go. And I love it. The passion and the information, and it's a lot of fun. So thank you for ending the year, our season finale in an awesome note. Thank you so much.
Thanks for having us.
Yes, thank you.
Yep.
Take care, guys.
Yep.
All
See
right,
you later.
bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
So that was a great way to end. I think that the resource, the value of information that we just got was super, super great. I literally had 20 questions and didn't get through all of them, but they answered all the questions in one. But, as Charlie says, hold the line. And it seems that self-care buying is really it's still there. So, a great recommendation is continue pushing with self-care, and sustainability seems to also be a great thing to focus on. We do want to say a couple highlights. This we're already working on our Bloom Together initiative, where it's open to all sponsors within the flower industry, and its intention is to celebrate and support collaboration, networking, and building community. It will be at the Doral Yard. We had over 300 people and donated about $2,400 to Seed Your Future and Florida State Florist Association. So if you're interested, please reach out. We'd love to have you. We're also opening up sponsor opportunities for next year. If you like the show, want to show your commitment to connecting, networking, and innovating, we'd love to have you on as a sponsor as well. Next year, we're also doing some great things when it comes to the free downloadable materials like our calendar. We're pushing our calendar this year, and we'll have it ready by the end of the month, where it's an events calendar for the entire floral industry. So make sure to download that. Go to our website, newbloomsolutions.com, to subscribe, and then you could download it there as well. And then we have the Wizards Wand every month that we're producing. So do go to subscribe to our newsletter, and you'll get the Wizards Wand as well. Another great insight is we're working on the new refresh Flowers and Scents website with Willie and Flowers and Scents. So super excited to launch that, as he's a pioneer of the flower industry and getting information out there. And that's truly our goal, to help support all that. Thank you to all the sponsors this year. Thank you to all the guests, the guest host, the host as well, the guest, and just Pro Flora, Wolf's, everybody had invited us to come to their show, to the conventions to do shows. Thank you again to all the audience for tuning in every time. Again, please subscribe, like, and press the little alert key so you don't miss an episode. We really do this out of passion and really to connect the entire floral industry. So thank you again to everybody. Have a great holiday season. Really appreciate you, and hope to see you again next year starting January. Take care. Have a great one. Bye-bye.